So our objectives are learn how to prepare for your interview and enhance your confidence. So hopefully by now you're starting to see a difference and feel a difference in your confidence as you're going through these workshops together and using your workbooks. Explore what we call the STAR technique and how to use it effectively during your interview. And plan and execute your strategic approach in regards to the interviewing. So I would ask that any other objectives that you might want to have covered into interviewing, because this can be a little bit subjective too. So this is really broad, but if there's anything else that you're curious about that you don't see in the objectives, feel free to send it in the chat. And it may be covered already in here. And if we miss it, we will get to it as well. So you've gone through your journey, you've built your resume, you've done some networking, you've applied for positions, and yes, congratulations, you've been notified for an interview. You've been selected, you've made it to the first phase in this part of the journey. So my question is, in a poll, I want to understand how many people already have stepped into the interviewing phase. So Noemi's going to launch that for us, and let's see some numbers. We're almost at an even split, I'm seeing. So what I see is 42% have been interviewing, 58% have not been interviewing. So in any case, I would be curious to understand how interviewing is going for the people that have had some interviews, and hopefully we'll get some time to discuss those points as well. We'll just give it another second. We can end the poll. Poll's already ended. So locking it in at 42% of you have been interviewing and 58% of you have not. Okay, so that is really good. We can have some shared stories and let's understand about what it means to prepare for a successful interview. So preparing for a successful interview, first phase is the actual before stage, right? So researching the organization, anticipating questions and preparing answers, practice. What can you expect during the interview? And then what do you need to do with the follow-up in the interview? So we're going to break these down for you section by section. So if we look at the before part, this is the key to really launching successfully into your interview. And sometimes an interview too is really about a conversation, right? With you and hiring manager, HR person, talent manager, director, department manager, that person that's interviewing you is conversation. And not only are you connecting with this person to understand if you're a good fit for the organization, you have to determine if this space and place is a good fit for two. And preparedness is key, but also realizing that it is a conversation. So when you're preparing for an interview, what are you most concerned about? Let's put it out there. Let's start talking about it and have some dialogue. What are you concerned about? Now you've got that call. Okay, so next Tuesday you have an interview. What's your showstopper? What's making your heart go pitter patter besides excitement? What are some of the fear points? Send your chat through the function. Nobody, we're all good. We're ready. We're confident. We're confident in the interview. We don't have any concerns. If I were in a recruitment situation and I landed an interview, I would want to make sure my first thing right away, yes, worried about not being prepared. So how do we prepare? Thank you, Nancy. I would worry about right away, where's the job posting that I applied to? Because typically once you start getting into this phase, you've applied for a few positions. So I want to make sure that I still have that posting and understand what it is that I'm applying for and being prepared for that. Moses, you're worried about getting a question that I cannot answer. Agreed with Moses. Okay, so sometimes we get really focused on this. And thank you for bringing this up, Moses and Richard, because sometimes we think, I want to know all of the questions so that I can prepare and get all the right answers. But that simply is not always accurate. Best fit is about competencies and personality. And sometimes you might get an answer incorrect, if you will, and that's okay. But your other competencies and your personality and your human skills also line up. Um, and again, it's about alignment of fit. And I realize that in your field, there's a lot of precision and accuracy, and right and wrong can be correct. But the willingness to say, okay, I was incorrect, right? Your humility will carry you further than having an incorrect answer. And Talita, I worry about my answer backfiring as a flaw instead of a good thing. So I would say that is probably really in positioning and character, right? So I could see it backfiring if you didn't take ownership or accountability and use it as a learning opportunity, as opposed to, yeah, I would use it as a learning opportunity and thank them, right? We're all, and have that growth learner's mindset, if that makes sense. These are all really great. And again, it's not about having the right answer. It's truly to understand too, and I think I do speak to this later on in the presentation. Why does that company, why does that university, why does that government agency, why does this lab have the position? Why is this role here? Why is it open, right? That's a really powerful question for you to ask. Why is the role open? And what do you have in terms of your values, your experience, your accreditations, in order to fill that role, to transfer over? Why are you a good fit? But understanding why that role is even open in the first place. And sometimes it's just not about the correct answer. It's about you as a person as well. You can get things wrong, but course correction's always an opportunity. Anybody else before we kind of drop into interview preparation? Okay, so you did talk about not being prepared. So what are different ways that you can prepare for your interview, right? We can research, we can anticipate questions. But I'd really recommend that yes, you have to anticipate your questions and prepare for your responses, but I want you to thread the theme through this whole process that it's a conversation, right? It's a conversation between two or more people. And then practice. So what does practice do? Practice builds confidence. Practice makes progress, right? So let's break down these three components of the interview prep. So how do you research, right? So here are some methodologies that you can do. So how many of you have now, here's a show of hands, how many of you have now done your homework and are a little bit more lively on LinkedIn? Show of hands. Find your raise your hand function. I think you're all experts at it by now. There we go. Noemi, thank you. Claire, yes, Claire, you're having amazing activity on LinkedIn. I know that. Diana, yes. So a couple of you, yes, Rasika, thank you. Richard, yes, Richard, thank you for messaging me. I got a few messages after our last call. That was really fantastic. Okay, so LinkedIn is a really great place to learn different things about the organization, their mission, their values, and if you align with it. The other great thing that you can learn on LinkedIn about an organization is who works there, and maybe somebody that you're connected with works there as well, which is why it's so important to build that professional network, which was from our second session. And how do you align? So the role, how do you find out about the role? How does the role contribute to the bigger picture? What are the essential qualifications of the role? And at this point, when you're on LinkedIn, do you have a connection with someone in the organization or an opportunity to connect with somebody new? So really understanding about the organization, the roles and the people that work there, and those can be done through their website. On LinkedIn, you can tell I'm a fan of LinkedIn, always use LinkedIn. It is a gateway into so many other, it's inroads into the organization that you're thinking about joining too. So aligning yourself with the organization. Okay, so knowledge. What do you know about a subject area? your abilities and your aptitudes. And so some of these, this terminology is really echoing on some of the stuff that we've learned about already. So what are your proven skills and talents or abilities to learn about this? And your personal attributes, so your own work style, your own work ethic, your principles, your values, beliefs. You know what you know. I love this. You know what you can do and you know how to get it done. And awareness as to what your opportunities are. So who would like to see a tool that will kind of help them guide through a conversation perhaps, or framework to help understand knowing what you know, knowing what you can do and how you can get it done? Anyone want to see a little chart? I think you may have it in your workbook. At least I hope that you do. And if you don't, let me know and I will make sure that it's sent over your way as well. So this is called, don't ask me why it's called a T-chart. At one point it was 2 columns and now it's 3. So it's no longer a T-chart, but we never rebranded or rechanged the name. So now you've got the call, you've done some research and you're looking at the role, okay? Obviously it's going to have more than 2 rows, okay? What you want to do is write down everything that you can that this position is required, that maybe you've already done like one quick phone screen, you've got the posting, you've learned some more on LinkedIn. So what are the responsibilities? What are some of the human skills, technical skills, experience, values, assets, all of those things, and you are going to list them in that column. Then your next column, you're going to write about the experience that you have to date on that. Where have you worked in this space or studied in this space, right? And the reason why this is so powerful is you're framing your conversation. You're framing it together. So when you're asked that question, you've already kind of practiced, you've written it down, you've got memory retention, and you're ready to place it into a conversation. So this is sort of part of the reinforcement in the practice. And the third column is, what are those gaps and opportunities that you may have, right? Is it a showstopper? Do I need to go back to school for 6 more years? Okay, they're asking for 2 years of experience. I've got 18 months of experience. Is it a showstopper? No, right? So it really helps you identify any opportunities or gaps and how you can address them in a conversation. This is one of my favorite tools, even for the application process, and then again, for the interview process. Can somebody let me know if this is in your workbook or not? I'm like, I'm gonna pop off the mic. It is, yay, okay, that's great. Let's have a show of hands or a thumbs up, a celebration sign, if you could see this tool being of value to you for interview preparation. All right, Richard's a clap, that's great, thank you. We've got a few more in there, that's great. It really helps. This is a really great self-awareness tool. And it's not meant to scare you, because often maybe you have all of them. That's great. Maybe you're overqualified, or maybe you're right where you need to be. But often we don't have all of the qualifications, but we don't need to have. Remember when we talked about what are the specific qualifications that you need, and then the assets, and then like the nice to haves, right? You know what you must have and the nice to haves, and this really helps frame it out. So that's the first part. Now you've prepared. Now you understand, you've got a benchmark of where you're going into this interview at. Let's talk about the questions and sort of prepared responses. So you've learned about the role. So what kind of questions do you think will be asked? Write down your appropriate answers based on your experience. Say it in your own words so that you're telling a story. Okay, I know that we talked about it being a conversation, but sometimes we get in situations and we might feel a little bit nervous and we get the brain freeze, and then the interviewer asks a question, and even though you probably have a laundry list of examples, you can't think of one. By reinforcing it and practicing it and writing it down, it's going to be ready, available. It's going to be in your frontal cortex, and you're going to have access to it, and you're going to be able to say, oh my goodness, I was on a project with my colleague Moses, and this is what we did, and this is what happened. So how do you know what kind of questions there are? Like, does someone want to look in the magic ball and understand what kind of questions they could be asking? There's so many, and there's different types of interviews as well. So let's pop over and learn about the different types of interviews and interview questions. And I really want you to think about this one because we're going to do some breakout rooms in a minute, but let's talk about interview questions. So we've kind of got the general scope. So how have you demonstrated skills related to the role that's posted? What skills have you acquired and done, right? When you think about the changing the tire example that we did in the last one, I've researched how to change the tire. I have and can confidently change the tire. I have changed tires so many times that I can do it with my eyes closed and I can facilitate how to teach it to 35 people, right? Technical case study project or lab. So these are really job specific, and I feel that this may happen in your space, that you may have some kind of case study or technical. And then behavioral is describe how you have handled a task in the past. So tell me about a time where you may have had a conflict with a colleague. What was the conflict and tell us how it was resolved? That would be an example of a behavioral based interview question. And then we have a situational type of question, which is the same. And that's my least favorite because you could answer it however you want to answer it or however you think the interviewer might want to answer it. And it's really subjective. But sometimes it's just really nice to catch a pulse check too. So I understand why interviewers use it. So it might sound something like this. If you were on a team with 5 people and 2 of the people were not pulling their weight on the project, how would you handle that situation? What would that look like to you? So those are sort of the types of interview styles of questions. Now I want to send you out into breakout rooms and I want you to come back with your scary interview questions, your showstoppers. What are the ones that you're most nervous about in terms of interviewing? So I'm going to get welcome back, everybody. I think we are all regrouped. So I'm excited. Fear factor here in our workshop. Let's start putting them through the chat function, or if you would like to take yourself off of mute. Parth, I think you are not on mute. Thank you. If you would like to take yourself off of mute and share some of your most dreaded, scary questions, or put them through the chat function, let's unpack them. What did you come up with in your breakout room? Oh, yeah. So Leah wrote, so tell me about yourself. It's so open-ended. Yes, I want to talk about that. So I do a lot of interview coaching, and this is the showstopper stumper over and over, time and time again, because people don't know what they're supposed to say. Is there and because we're so focused on I really want to get the right answer, we get even more lost and confused. So how many of you, show of hands, have stumbled upon that question? I will say that I have in my previous interviews for sure, before I got really comfortable and understood a little bit more. I will give you a tip here. 3 to 5 minutes tops for responses in an interview. 5 is long, but sometimes if you are articulating a case study or a big project and you need to kind of get from inception to completion and there's a lot of steps and complexities, there's breadth for that. But 3 minutes is the sweet spot in answering a question. Some people walk themselves through their own resume. I think it's really important to share with the interviewer our human side. As we live in this virtual world, it is imperative to start off and be warm, right? To have that human connection, especially if you're interviewing on this kind of platform. Not having that warmth and having that humanness in the conversation makes the whole stage feel cold. And then we constrict. So really important to stick it to about 3 minutes, maybe a little bit of your career and your academics, and then a little sprinkle of yourself, right? That shows your human side. So a little bit of any kind of work career, any kind of academics that, and maybe why you're inspired to go in the direction that you had, and a little sprinkle about you and your own life, right? Like, where you live, where you grow up, what you like to do in your free time. Maybe you come from a large family, a small family, but just a little bit of that sprinkle of humanness that creates a rapport, if you will. I hope that was helpful, Leah, in terms of that. I get that one all the time, and often I will take. We can, in some of my like one-on-one coaching sessions, we'll spend a lot of time really owning that narrative, because that's part of integrating your own brand as well. So sorry, I lost the conversation thread. Here we are. So situational questions from Rasika. Yeah, situational. Tell me about why situational questions are challenging. Is it because you are in? I find that situational. I think Rasika, did you come off of mute?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Tell me more about that.
I think situational questions, you are not actually prepared for the situational questions prior to your interview. These are the real-time questions, and you're just not ready for those questions. I mean, how to address them at that point of time. So it's just challenging, I would say. It's not the scariest question, but I think it's challenging question.
Yeah, so I would definitely go back to the previous slide about what you know, and applying what you do know in your own personal attributes, and really try to immerse yourself. If you were actually in that situation, how would you respond? And I would like to say that the interviewer at that point typically is really looking for character competencies, right? Do you have a growth mindset? How agile or adaptable are you? What is your kind of character conversation around problem solving or critical thinking, right? They're doing a benchmark or a pulse check on how you would respond. It might be the wrong, incorrect answer in terms of technicality, but your mindset and your character competency might shine right through. So it's not necessarily the right or wrong answer, but it's how you go about it. Noemi, no context
Yes,
for company. Sorry, did somebody ask a question that I missed? Did I miss something?
Oh no, I was just saying like why open-ended situational questions can be challenging, because you're not necessarily like something that you might do in a situation in previous positions or with other companies may not apply to the company that you're applying to. That can cause like, because each company has a different kind of like structure and expectation, so it can cause like a bit of confusion, especially if you're sensitive to wanting to make sure that you like are conforming to what they want you to.
Yes, thank you very much. And excellent point. And then I would pivot back. There's always going to be that concern or ambiguity, but doing a little bit of research on the company culture and expectations and standards, right? You will know if they're kind of, ethical, high performance, sort of you do your homework and have a little bit of a pulse check and know what you know and do what you do and apply your personality and your competencies into that conversation. So that is not a lot of scary questions. I'm not leaving until I get two more scary questions, because this is your safe place. This is where you get to talk about it, right? Okay, since English is my second language, when I'm stressed, sometimes I miss questions or I can't even talk. Oh, thank you for being so real. My English knowledge drops to half of its actual capacity. Okay, Parnian, thank you. So this is real, right? And I appreciate you putting yourself out there and being vulnerable. And I would really open up to the group for anybody else who's had practice or maybe a shared best practice as well, into what's worked for you or hasn't worked for you. Being in the situation of an interviewer, I think that if you came to me and I was interviewing you and you right off the bat said, I'm really excited and I'm also really nervous about this interview. English is my second language. When I am excited and nervous, sometimes I have a challenge communicating, right? I feel like I lose some of my knowledge of the English language. So I'm going to be really methodical and take my time to answer the questions, right? Being vulnerable and identifying that, because it's only language, it's not competency. And by sharing that, if you shared that with me, I would be like, thank you very much. And you know what you've done for me as the interviewer is you've given me permission to say, can you tell me about that again? Because I missed some of it. So let's talk about it more. Right? So I think just being really honest and putting it out there. I think it's great and human to say, you know, in any kind of interview, like I'm nervous. This is my first Zoom interview I've ever done. English is my second language. Interviews make me excited and nervous. So it's going to take me a little bit of time to formulate my answers. How does that sound? Is that helpful? So anybody else? Let's do one more very scary question. This is where we get to rehearse. This is the safe place, right? This is your practice before you go out and play the game. This is where, this is a no judgment zone. There's no yeah buts here. So if there is something that you're thinking about, chances are somebody in your breakout room or another breakout room has the same scary question. Nothing? No more scary questions? I will keep on moving then. If you want to talk to me after about scary questions, then you can come and talk to me after about scary questions too, and I'll be happy to unpack some of them. So we're going to do a little bit about behavioral interview questions. So these are based on studies that show that recent past performance is the best indicator of future performance. And I want you to really recognize this statement is so powerful, and I'm going to tell you why. So people say that your recent past performance is the best indicator of future performance, and that sometimes is reinforcing and doing really good things, and it's also learning what not to do, right? So sharing and identifying some of those key teachable moments and learning moments can really project our future performance. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be real here. When I was in an HR finance role, I made a really huge error, and it was a numerical error, and I couldn't understand why the numbers, we'll call them, the numbers were not lining up. And it was like a 1.72 million, I remember that number, it's in my head, it's ingrained in my head, a $1.72 million error. And I made that error because I thought I could be more efficient by going a different route. So that was a catalyst for me to have a much better future performance by staying with the course and not creating a new process into something that's always worked really well. So it can work both ways, right, in terms of performance. So any questions about the behavioral interview questions? We're going to do a solo activity at this point. So what questions do you think you'll be asked? Create your own questions here. Why should we hire you? Describe a significant project that you planned and implemented. So there are some examples you can see. And then write your response. Tell your story. So we're going to give you about 5 minutes here to do this activity. And then we're going to break it down in terms of what we call the STAR response. So our STAR response is a really great way of framing your responses, especially for behavioral or technical questions where the interviewer asks about something you've done in the past, right? So the STAR response is a situation. So describe the situation, describe what the task or the project was related to the situation. What were the actions that you took? And then what was the outcome? Right? What were the results? What was the outcome? And what did you learn from this? And you know, something, you know, asterisk star here, no pun intended. You want to make sure that you use an example that has enough substance to demonstrate your skill set and your competencies and your character, depending on what type of interview question it is. But you definitely want to make sure that you do choose an impactful enough result, I guess, if you will, or story. So situation, task, action, and result. Another point to remember is about detail. So one of the questions people seem to ask the most is how much detail is enough, right? How much is too much? How much is enough? First, you need to choose a recent example. So when you choose your example in your story, I mean, unless it's a real showstopper, right? If it's something, you know, defining in your trajectory of academics and career, then try to keep it within the 3 to 5 year time frame whenever possible. Consider how quickly things change, right? So something that, you know, the relevancy of it. So if it's 10, 15 years ago, that may lose some of its relevancy through process, procedure, department, mission, and just technology alone. So recent, up-to-date, current is the best way to go in terms of what to choose. And you need to provide enough detail so the interview person or panel can envision you performing the job for which they are hiring. That means details. If you look at this flower, this is not enough detail. This is enough detail using the STAR response. So now you have a couple of questions, right, that you've scripted, and you've scripted a little bit of a response. Now I want you to reframe your response a little bit, and I want you to reframe it using the STAR. Okay, so this is another activity where, you know, head down with your tablet, laptop, pen, paper, wherever you're working at, look back at your scripted answers in your workbook, and I want you to try to reframe them using the STAR response. So we're going to take a couple of minutes and do that. And whatever you don't get done, then take away with you, because I know that you're all going to use this as you start practicing and getting into your interviews. You know, use this as your recipe. I'm really like going with the food analogies because we started off today talking about food. So I'm just going to do food comparisons. And this is your framework. This is your recipe cards, right? This is your preparation. And so I'll give you a few minutes here. We're at the 49, and then we'll go to the, we're going to go to the 52 on this. Any questions, pop them up in the chat or take yourself off mute and feel free to ask away. So an example might be an interviewer could be saying, tell me about a time where you've improved a process or a procedure. And you may want to say, okay, so here was the situation. People were, I'm just trying to think of something relevant, maybe in your field. So here's a really basic one. You know, thinking of automating something. So we were doing our payroll by hand. We were writing down our hours. And it took us a really long time, and then we had to add them up. So my task was to be able to create a system that automated this process so people didn't have to handwrite and hand in a slip to count for their hours. So what I did was I researched payroll systems. I found one that was cost effective for the company. I researched 17 different payroll administration companies. I found one that was the right size for our organization and aligned with our values. I did some rapport building and interviews with the organizers in that company, and then we signed on. And the result was that we would normally, you know, in 1 month, it would take us up to 7 hours to produce payroll. And now it's streamlined and efficient with the new payroll software that we use for 1.5 hours. So that saved us 6 hours a month times 12 months a year. And what I learned is automation is key, and we're moving in that direction all over. So that was just kind of a really high level example. So that is the STAR response, and I invite you to continue to keep working on that in your time, if you like. And then how do we practice, right? So what are some different ways of how you can practice? You can find a peer coach, right? So finding a colleague that can help you, and you can kind of work through that conversation. And if you're really nervous, like even with English as a second English as a second language. And I really definitely even encourage you more to get super comfortable having those conversations and talking it out, because practice makes progress. And let's use the gym analogy again, right? If you're only going to the gym once a month, once every couple of months, then it hurts and it doesn't feel good and we forget how to do things and it's clunky and we're sore after, right? But if we're practicing and we're going to the gym 2 and 3 times a week, then we become more confident and we're flexing those muscles and we become stronger. And again, practice makes progress. When you have a peer coach, you help each other improve your interview skills. You practice responses, you get best practices, and you get feedback. You create this feedback loop and learn from each other. That was really well. Actually, you talked for 7 minutes for that one answer. Let's try and shorten it up. And practice in front of a mirror. Also, you can record yourself on Zoom, pretending that somebody's asking you a question, and then record yourself and see what that looks and feels like. And you could do an even better if, right? That would be even better if I stopped fidgeting. That would be even better if my answer was a little bit shorter. So practice, practice, practice. That is practice to build your confidence. So now we're going to take, what are we at for time? We're going to take 7 minutes and you're going to practice your STAR response. So this is your frame. Everybody, if you want to grab your phone and just take a quick picture of this, or Naomi, I don't know if you can send it through in the breakout rooms. We're going to take 7 minutes and have your partner in a group. We're going to go into pairs, ask you questions that you've prepared one of your STAR responses for, and deliver it. Remember, try to be conversational, this is safe. This is a safe place, so it's going to feel a little bit clunky, and that's okay. But just work on that conversation flow, if you will. And then the partner is going to give you feedback, right? What elements were there? You know, was the situation task there? What was missing? The result? Well, the result was I learned. So use this for your framework, and I want you to go away in pairs, and I want you to practice this with each other. So here's your chance, your first chance at practicing. Okay, guess what? It's sharing time. It's sharing time. I want to hear from 3 to 4 groups, and I'm being really cognizant of time. We were just talking about that. I want to hear obviously from everybody. I just want to make sure that we're staying on track. So I'm taking volunteers to talk about how did that go, what went really well, and what was your biggest area of improvement? What'd you learn? And I will have to call on people if you don't want to volunteer. I'll volunteer.
All right, I'll volunteer if that's okay.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah. So yeah, we had a little bit of time to discuss a couple of questions. We were in 3, not 2. So one of the people was not able to talk too much. But it seems like the STAR response strategy, it works better for when you're talking about like experiences that you had in the past, right? And then like there are different types of questions that you'll not be able to use that.
Absolutely.
But yes, I think the experience was good, and like they were like, I was doing mine and they were able to help me with my response, and it feels like it was appropriate. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Richard and company, for sharing. Most appreciated. And yes, the STAR, I guess I should have been more specific, is really fantastic. It is the methodology for that behavioral based question, right? Tell me about a time when. Tell me about a time. Share an experience in which, right? So that's the framework you would use for that behavioral based questions for sure. Moses, you came up with ideas to work around. Tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
So yeah, no worries. So the common theme was similar to Richard, right? So you go to the interview, you know, and we were talking about, okay, I've been in school for X amount of years. I don't have an experience. I've never been in the workforce. I've been doing a lot of research, you know, at school. So when they asked me, tell me a time when you implemented a new process, for example, like we were thinking, okay, what do I say? Because I really don't have that. So I said the STAR method still applies. And what you obviously with your preparation for all these questions, they're going to come up. You can still use it and say, well, you know, it's interesting because at our university, at our lab, in our team lab, whatever it is, right? We had some challenges. The situation was that we were using 10 different processes for, you know, something that we were working on, research, right? Research papers. So we knew it was a challenge for the professors and for us. So we did some brainstorming with our colleagues. We had 10 people meet, and now we start talking about initiative and action, right? And we're showcasing the ability to take initiative. And we came up with a new design based on collaboration from all of our team members. And we piloted the design to test out and get feedback, create that feedback loop. And the result was that it got approved by our university. Now our lab has a new research, whatever. And so that's how we get around it.
Yes, absolutely. Because some of those behavioral based questions, right? Those behavioral based questions, tell me about a time when, they don't have to necessarily be specific to your work experience. They can be school, they can be church, they can be life experiences, right? And often you're probably not going to be applying for roles that are asking you for 10 years of experience at this point, right? You're going to be applying for relevancy as well. Let's hear from one more person, one more group. One more. How was the star response? What went well? What do you want to work on? Oh, don't make me volunteer. What did it feel like to kind of talk it out in a pretend mock interview? You can even go in the chat function. Whoops. I moved away, sorry. Okay, so nobody is, I'm not going to volunteer because that's not very nice. And I'm a nice person. But I hope that you gained a little bit of value and got a takeaway. So I'm going to invite you to, and if you're not going to share your experience at this point, if you can put something in the chat function, a takeaway that you learned from being in the breakout room for 5 minutes and kind of practicing that star response. So what is a takeaway that you got for the last 5 minutes? And then we can move on. Yes, yeah, exactly. Volunteer work or school. It's all applicable. Okay, in the essence of time, I'm going to move on, and hopefully you had some takeaways in there. During the interview, so let's talk about, there's different ways of interviewing. One of them is obviously the virtual interview or person to person. We're going to focus a little bit on the virtual interview. So it's really important to be comfortable on camera. And everybody is not on camera right now, but I also understand that hopefully that you're taking notes and using your notebook. You want to make sure that you are set up for success. So what does that mean? Staging, lighting, appearance, and mannerisms. What does all that mean, right? You want to make sure first and foremost that your video, audio, and internet connections are secure and that you're not going to lose connectivity. So perhaps if you're in an area where sometimes you have your connection is unstable, you would want to make sure that you're plugging in with an Ethernet so that you're staying connected all the time. You want to make sure that everything's charged and that your batteries aren't going to die in the middle of the interview. You also want to make sure that you're comfortable with the platform that you're interviewing on. Like, are you using Zoom? Are you using Google Hangouts? Are you using Teams, right? What are you using? Cisco WebEx? What platform are you using? And make sure that you are set up for success and that you have tested it and you've done a dry run with sister, brother, partner, mom, dad, somebody, and you're familiar with the technology, so it's less clunky and you can get into the interview conversation. You want to make sure that you're choosing a room that's free of distraction, that's well lit, and that you have a clutter-free background. Don't look at mine. If you do have a background that's full of clutter or is busy or distracting, then you want to make sure that maybe you can use a virtual background. So who had a background? Oh, Claire did, but Claire's gone. But I can watch. So you can see my background's really busy, right? And I'm going to put a virtual background on. I would suggest, there we go. Let's try this. See? So now I have a virtual background. Can you see that? Is it there yet? Right. This is my new, yeah, here's my new office. So you could do that as well. Show yourself from the waist up, right? You don't need full body, like anything, face. You don't want to also like have your face right into the camera. I actually had an interview with someone who, like, I think they had their face in the camera, and it was so distracting. I actually, within 10 minutes, said, "Can you please just back up?" Because it was almost intimidating, right? Have this presence right in, it was like they were jumping out of the camera at me. So having that proportion, I like to say 60% if possible, making sure that your phone is off, your eye camera, or you're making eye contact with the camera. And another thing that's really important for people who are wearing dress shirts, ties, like collared shirts and ties, you want to practice what it looks like if you're sitting down. Okay, if you can stand up at an interview, I would say stand up. If you have the capacity to be at a stand-up desk, then by all means stand up. It also is proven to cascade confidence as well, and it's a better posture, better presence. So if you can stand up, stand up. If you cannot stand up, make sure that when you sit down, what you're seeing is relevant, right? Did your shirt come up here? Is your tie over here? Right? So do a spot check before you log in, because sometimes you get dressed and it looks great and you stand in front of the mirror and you're like, yes, I've got my rockin' interview outfit on. Then you sit down and then it's like inside out and all squishy. So those are just some small nuances. You want to make sure you're creating a positive impression. So dressing appropriately, be on time. My motto is, if you're not early, you're late. And I also am human enough to know that back in the day when we had to drive to interviews, that there were things, giving yourself enough time to get to the place where you're interviewing, and that there is also things that are out of our control too. There could be accidents along the way. Road construction started that day. But if you are going into an interview, do make sure that you do your research in terms of, we have enough technology that you can punch into Google Maps. I'm going to be traveling on Tuesday at noon, and they're going to tell you what the typical traffic patterns are on that time so that you can actually prepare for the travel. Sit upright, lean a little bit forward so you're engaged in the conversation. It's not like, hey, yeah, it's good to meet you, right? You want to have that, like, as if you were in the space interviewing, you want to come across as that as well. Using natural hand gestures, smiling and being yourself, speaking slowly with pauses, and using, varying your tones, so interjecting enthusiasm, and trying to eliminate the ums and ahs. And sometimes we just do that, right? When we say it out loud, eliminate ums and ahs, and we talk about saying it, then it's a seed planter in your brain, and you're less likely, you may use and ah less because we're talking about it. And then I would also like to say that breathe. It's completely appropriate to take space and take a breath. It's okay to express and convey your emotion. I'm excited, I'm nervous. And this is the important part, that it's really important to build rapport on camera. Okay, otherwise it's going to feel cold and unnatural, like I had said earlier. So, and some really truly some interviewers will just go into that, and that's their style of interviewing. I would definitely set the stage and create an opportunity to say, where are you dialing, where are you zooming in from, right? I'm outside of the Ottawa Valley. Where are you, Leah, zooming in from? And creating that small talk. And so what happens when you create that small talk is your shoulders that were up here because you're nervous and a little bit scared, all of a sudden are down here. Your posture changes. You're a little bit more relaxed and natural because you're building rapport and you're not going in to the race without that warm up. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about speed, expression, and energy. So for me, speed is really an opportunity because I will get going too fast. If I get nervous or excited, then I'm going to just keep going and going and talk a mile a minute. So I have to be really cognizant to make sure I'm taking space and breathing, and your energy, right? Creating your energy comes in ways of body language and facial expressions as well. That's really important. I also want to talk about permission to pause in an interview. So people get so focused on getting the right answer and answering the question, and that can create anxiety and it can also create a brain freeze. And I want you all to know that is 100% perfectly appropriate to say, Moses, can I have a minute, please? I just want to formulate my answer. I want to make sure that I'm communicating what I want to communicate properly. I just need a minute to think about a really good example. Can we have permission to pause here, right? That is absolutely okay because an interviewer is going to want you to deliver a really good response that you're comfortable and confident about. And it shows that you're thoughtful as well and intentional in your delivery, as opposed to fire hosing out any answer that comes to the front of your brain, which is something that I would do back, 10, 15 years ago. Like, I'll give you 25 examples if you want right now, right? Because we're not tapping into our body's energy and expressing ourselves in a way that people can understand. I think somebody's in the chat. Oh, yes, it shows thoughtfulness. Thanks, Moses. So speed, expression, and energy. How you present your responses in an interview is, of course, very important, right? The messaging is important. You may not have the right answer, but those competencies, characteristics, and communication are equally as important in terms of the conversation. Expressions convey emotions. So your facial expressions convey your emotions. Be aware of where you're looking, make eye contact with panel members, even if you're busy writing down your responses, and try to smile as you would in a natural conversation. So I was shared a best practice when you're in a Zoom call, maybe with more than 2 people. So some people here in this room may have a panel interview where you're interviewed by multiple people on screen or multiple people in person. So being really aware of your camera presence is important. So that's why practice is important. And what I would encourage you to do is, we can distract ourselves, right? I can look at myself in the camera and be like, oh my gosh, I haven't smiled in 10 seconds. I'm not smiling. I'm coming across as cold. And now I'm going to lose the intention of the whole entire group, right? And sometimes it's really good for you to see yourself. And for some people, it's not good, right? So you can select on your view to not show yourself. So if you're somebody who's going to be distracted about, I hope I'm doing okay with my presence, and it may take you off track, then turn the self view off. Practice enough so that you feel comfortable enough in how you're portraying yourself, and turn the self view off, right? And so that you're really being present. But if you're not distracted by it and you kind of want to pulse check yourself, by all means, do that. Okay. Next, let's talk about what your body says. So sit tall and lean forward. We already talked about that. Be aware of your hand gestures. I know I'm a talker. You probably see me. I fidget with things. I need to. Otherwise, you will just see me rocking all of the time. Before you begin each question, do a quick body scan for good posture and readjust your position. If you're slouching, wear your hands. Put them on your lap if you're a fidgeter like myself, and then just focus on your response. So give yourself permission to pause. I've interviewed people where you ask a question and they're really intentional and thoughtful, and they're like, you can see them breathing and then articulating their response. That's appropriate. It's so a way of preparing yourself to communicate your response with intention and confidence as well. So what's your body saying? How are you sitting? How are you slouching? How are you standing? What is your eye contact? What are your hands doing? Where are you at on the camera? You'll know that before you start. So here we go, verbal tics. This is not speed and verbal tics are my opportunities. So can you speak on camera or in person for 1 minute without saying or ah? I can if I really try. I have reduced my ums and ahs. The more practice you do with these interviews, the STAR response, framing your questions, using the interview Tchart, doing your research, the more preparation, the more practice, the more confidence, the more awareness of ums and ahs are going to reduce those verbal tics as well, right? So you have to practice your responses in a way so that you're not using them. And I really find, and I could truly say this honestly, that your nerves allow you, it like drives the bus to say and ah, but the more prepared you are, the less you're going to say it because you're prepared and you're ready to talk about it. And once you get a couple of questions and that conversation is flowing in the interview, then it's a little bit more natural and those ums and ahs don't come out as frequently. Generally, we speak fast, right? And then we tend to say those ums and ahs and to fill in those gaps. So by speaking slowly, we're going to use less ums and ahs. Do we have time? Yeah, I remind myself that being quiet is better than saying or ah. Someone else won't notice a little pause where they're going to notice the verbal filler. Yes, absolutely. I will tell you, like, listen to our prime minister. He's an ummer. He has a lot of verbal tics. When you listen to Trudeau speak, he's an and an r. So let's see how we are for time. Do we have to? We do not have time to go into a breakout room. I wanted to pair you off and talk about timing 1 to 2 minutes and seeing how many times, right? Have a conversation. Leah, you talk to me. How many times did I say or on? How many times did you say or on? So your homework is to sit on not sit on a timer, start a timer for 1 to 2 minutes and see how many times you're using those verbal tics. Right? Gauge yourself and kind of thread that through into all your conversations. And I'm telling you, if we were to meet next week or the week after, you would say, I've reduced my umming and ahhing, and I didn't even know how much I was umming and ahhing. And then switch roles with the person that you're doing that with and tell them to do that. Okay. And that will help with your umming and your ahhing. We all do it. Some are experts and don't do it as much anymore. And some of us have a lot of opportunity, if you will. Okay, so tell me, now you've made it through the interview. Oh, thank goodness, there's no more questions. Yes, I did it. And now the interviewer says to you, okay, what questions do you have for us at this point? What are some things that you want to know? And guess what? It's your turn to put some in the chat. What are some questions that you think are appropriate or that you may want to ask the person or people that are interviewing you? Do we have any? Think of yourself. Think of those who have been interviewing already. What were some questions that you wish you'd asked? You left the interview, you had an opportunity, or maybe you didn't have an opportunity to ask questions. What were some questions or a question that you wished you'd asked? What is the current challenge that the organization is working on right now? I love that one. I love it. Thanks, Leah. What is the question that you know that you're walking in there? You're excited, you've got the interview, you've made a list of a couple of questions. What are those questions that you're walking in with? What do you like most about your job? Awesome. Yes. Yeah, that really is defining. Such a powerful question, for sure. Let's hear from one more. And then I'm going to give you a laundry list. So you're going to want to get your pens and papers and write some down. One more. Richard, details about the position that may not be clear so far. Absolutely. Yeah, what am I missing here? What else? What can you tell me about the workplace culture? Yes, that's so important. Is it aligned with you? right? What do you like about the culture? What would you change in the culture, right? How would you improve that? Oh, Clement, that is my all-time favorite question. Why is this position open? Because that can be defining of culture. People sometimes don't talk about if things, some companies are really open and saying, you know what, we're going through some change management right now. We have some real opportunities to grow. We've got some turnover and we're really looking to bring someone in because of this. We want somebody who's going to be able to impact and roll up their sleeves and get into this lab and that's not afraid, right? And they may speak to that. Understanding why the position is open, it gives you a little bit of visibility into the culture for sure. Some of the ones that I wrote down are what will be expected of me in the first 90 days? Okay. What do you need to do in that probationary period? What is expected of you? How do you train? What does training look like? What is the working environment, right? This is the trendy question of where we are right now. Are you fully remote? Are you fully on site? Or are you in a hybrid environment? What is the culture like? Okay, you should always know leaving an interview. You should always know this leaving an interview. What are the next steps in recruitment? What can I expect, right? Okay, you're interviewing for another 2 weeks. Then we're going to go into a technical interview, right? You should know when you leave that interview what to expect next. A phone call, an email, a next steps, a job offer. What's the window? When are you hiring, right? Please, when you get into that interview and you're leaving, you know what your next steps are. How many of you, raise your hand, have been into an interview and walked out and said, I don't know what to expect next. I have no idea. Nobody told me and I'm not really sure, right? Sure wish I asked that. I know I've done that. And then you wait and you're like, I don't know, like now what do I do? Now what do I do? What are next steps in recruitment? Yes. What are the biggest challenges that you would anticipate I would face in this role? Like if you were to hire me tomorrow, what do you think my biggest challenges would be? How would how would you describe the climate or culture of this department in the organization, right? Especially if you're in a larger organization. What are the next steps in the interview process? Yes. And what are the measures of success in this role? Right. So building on that 90-day, how is my performance measured? What are the expectations? So those are some nuggets of questions. What do we do after the interview? Right. We wait. So the other thing that's really important is that you prepare your references in advance, depending on the stage of the interview. So know that your references, well, I just said, it's driving me crazy. So prepare your references in advance. Okay, so you know now some of you have already started interviewing and you are going to be interviewing. So who's in your back pocket? Have 3 to 5 references. Okay, so that covers maybe 2 are away on holidays, 2 are sick. You always have 3 to 5 that you can go to. They understand the role that you have applied to. Give them an outline of the job description and highlight some of your success stories so they know. It really helps them set the stage, or as we've identified here, it references a script for them. Okay, so prepare your references. Don't get in, because if Leah says it's really great meeting you, Jennifer, we're gonna forward you on to the next steps. In order to do that, we'd like to have your references by the end of the day today, right? I don't have now I've got to dig people up and call people, right? So be prepared, make it part of your preparation. You know that you're all going to go out there and start that interviewing if you haven't already. Make sure you have your references lined up. What else do you do in terms of interview follow-up, right? You want to make sure that within 24 hours, you express your gratitude for taking time to have that interview and conversation with them, and always include an invitation to respond. Okay, so what do I mean by that? You may already know what the expectation is in terms of, you can expect to hear from us in 2 weeks, right? That's no problem. So thank you, Leah. It was a real pleasure learning more about what you do here and your role and what the organization culture is all about. Thanks for sharing information on the role that you're hiring for. I am so excited about next steps. Please let me know what you need from me in terms of moving forward. Is there anything else I can provide for you? That's an invitation to respond, right? Would you be interested in connecting with me on LinkedIn? Hopefully you already have connected, but in that you may not have, because this could be your first time that you have met face to face or in that interview. So always that invitation to respond keeps the communication open, right? You're not closing it and there isn't wonder. And that is kind of concluding what the interview life cycle looks like. And that's a wrap up, right? So let's kind of go over the 3 C's of interview in a nutshell. I want you to take these best practices or guiding principles away with you before we close, okay? So points to consider, the 3 C's: confidence. Your confidence is the first thing that an interviewer will notice. An interviewer also knows that you're human, right? So articulating that you're feeling nervous or excited, that's okay. Confidence in what you do and why it matters, that's key. Communication. Your confidence is the first thing that an interviewer will notice in terms of communication. Okay, so what does that mean? You know, being humble yet confident. So being vulnerable and saying, English is my second language. I'm both excited and nervous. I just need a little bit of time to communicate my responses to you. That's confidence. That's scary, but that's confidence, right? Ensure that you've done some things so that you're really comfortable and relaxed so that you can feel more confident. That could be some deep breathing, right? Before you get into your space where you're interviewing, hands on your lap, close your eyes and take 5 breaths with 5 counts. 5 counts in and 5 counts out, and do that 5 times, and you will be aligned in your come back into your body, right? Because when we get nervous, we're a little bit all over the place, but when you focus on your breath, then you're telling your mind to be right here, and that calm will help with the confidence. Minimize your confidence shakers, right? Don't wear something that you're not comfortable in because you think it might look better. Wear the shirt that looks good and you feel good in, right? Those are small, that would be a small example of what we would consider a confidence shaker. Make sure you're sleeping the night before. Make sure you've cleared your calendar before that. Don't give yourself a 10-minute window to get logged into a place. Be prepared. Most importantly, know your value. If you don't know your value and what you're transferring into that role, then how are they going to know that? And part of the value is the content. So what content is the interviewer looking for? Do you have the skill set required for the job? And can you or do you have at least 7 out of 10 of the skills required? And can they or you perform that well? And what's your motivation, for seeking this job? Because you may not have all the skills and that they are looking for, but what's your motivation and your character competencies that would make me as a recruiter say, you know what? They're missing a couple of things here, technical things. They're so trainable. They're so willing, right? They really showed their motivation and their growth mindset, and the experience and their trajectory so far shows me that they're going to be a really good fit. Okay, so understanding that that your content is important in your delivery, right? Learn as much as possible about that organization. Know your value, know what the organization is all about, and how do you fit into that, right? Any questions about kind of confidence, communication, content? Knowing your resume is really important, knowing what you've written on your resume, and because you're writing your resume, so you're going to be able to speak to them because that's kind of your brochure, if you will. What questions might you have from, the confidence, communication, content? And then I also invite you to ask questions about any of the interviewing life cycle at this point. That's the sort of wrap up. So confidence, communication, content.